Greetings, humans. Welcome to the first lecture of psychology, whatever psychology you're taking. We need to get our epistemology straight right at the beginning. For some people, this might be a repeat. For most people, it's the first time you're hearing this information. So treat this as a sample lecture. That's really what's going on here. Before we're buying hard copies of textbooks and settling into our rotations and stuff, I want you to see what the course is going to be like, and it's really going to be like this. It's not going to be like the intro where I'm talking about me. It's going to be about the material. I don't like talking about me. And really that's so you can decide whether this is the way you want to get your information and who you want to get your information for. This is what the term's going to be like. This particular lecture, I'm not really testing on it. It's not in the material, it's not in the textbook, it's sort of above, let's say below and beyond the textbook. This pertains to agreement 2. Agreement 1 is we're patient with each other, right? I'm a weird kind of guy, you're a college student, I kind of understand where you're coming from, and I'm patient with you, you understand where I'm coming from, you're patient with me. And we get along together. Agreement 2, though, is that I won't knowingly lie to you, which can be a problem because sometimes the material in the Psych 1 text, it's not exactly wrong or poorly intentioned, but it's coming from a position. And if you, you're watching MSNBC and they're telling you what the news is, but they're leaving things out, and then it seems like a particular spin is possible, but if you had that information, that spin is not possible. That's what's happening here. Sometimes the text is leaving stuff out because the author doesn't know maybe, or they have a point of view. And in order to say what's true, I need to give you the deep backgrounds. But if you also know this, you'd see the stamp that's on this piece of material. So I'm here to not lie to you, and I'm not perfect. Sometimes what I say isn't true. That's because everything I say is based on a good faith review of all of the best available evidence. 10 years ago sometimes, I haven't been the best at keeping up, and I have source amnesia. I forget my sources, and I'll tell you what's true when I learned it, and if I get better information along the way, I incorporate that, but I'm not perfect. I won't knowingly lie to you. And in order to not lie, sometimes I have to provide a deeper background than strictly you're ready for. So this epistemology stuff, we usually do this in graduate school. Some of it might go over your head. You might not be ready for it. I'm planting seeds here, okay? But it's so that later on I'm not telling you lies. So you don't have too much faith in information, basically. Okay. So what are we talking about? We're talking about epistemology. That's the subject of the day. All right. Epistemology is the study of knowledge, and in particular, the limitations on knowledge. In other words, how is knowledge possible and impossible? What kinds of knowledge can we never actually have access to? Science is philosophy. All right. And we just are bad at admitting that. Okay? Science is not moral philosophy. What's good? What is the good life? What does it mean to be upstanding? Not that interesting. Some of that comes up later, particularly if you're in Psych 2 and we're talking treatment modalities. We absolutely have to get into what constitutes the good life, so you can take a treatment modality that's appropriate for you. But most of the time, we're not really touching on that. The philosophy in question is epistemology. How is knowledge possible? And every scientist, every branch of science is going to have their own peculiar answer to those questions. How is knowledge possible? What are the limitations? We are going to be upfront and honest about that. We have a higher level of responsibility as psychologists, as honorary psychologists, which you are for the next 11 weeks. As long as you're in my class, you're an honorary psychologist. We have to be especially honest and self-aware. Why? Because psychology has a long storied history of creating and maintaining systems of oppression, without meaning to. The people who invented IQ tests were well-meaning. They wanted a way to identify who needs help so that we can sort them, and then sort them out, provide additional help to people who need it. And then later to decide who to just give up on. And then later still to decide who to disallow from the breeding population, right? American eugenics has at its heart IQ testing, and Nazism in Germany has at its heart American eugenics. We didn't mean to create all that stuff when Wexler or whoever is coming up with IQ testing, but we did. Psychology does create and maintain systems of oppression. Physics, it's hard to see how physics would create and maintain oppressive systems. Math, I know you feel oppressed by math in the course of a term, right, probably, but math doesn't create system-wide, society-wide oppressive matrices and stuff. So as a consequence, your math professor probably doesn't get up in front of the class on day one and say, hi, I'm Dr. whatever, and I'm a logical positivist. I believe that through the rigorous application of logic, you can definitively prove things true. A triangle is a shape with 3 intersecting lines. Each line intersects 2 other lines. The lines are straight, and the angles of the triangle always add up to 180 degrees. And here's proof of that. It's true in all times, places, and circumstances. Right? Logical positivism. Why don't they confess to that? Because they don't need to. They don't need to look at it that closely. Math doesn't create social systems and inform judges how to rule in cases and give psychiatrists the right to inject people with medication against their will. So you might find that we go a little bit to the point of absurdity on some stuff, and maybe even past the point of absurdity, and that's fine. We're doing it because we have to be extra careful compared to other people in society and other professionals and other kinds of scientists. The things we assert as true have real lasting consequences for people. So maybe you've heard psychology referred to as a soft science, or the almost as patronizing human science. Yeah, because often we're not looking at an objectively verifiable phenomenon. It's because we're not looking at the objectively verifiable phenomena that we have to be so careful what we assert is true. And so our epistemology is often tougher than that of a physicist or a chemist or a mathematician, exactly because we can't prove things definitively true, which we'll get to in a second. A second half hour. All right, so we start here with this question: how is knowledge possible? I like to do this in class and let you come up with the list, but it always winds up being this list. Here it is. There's going to be no interaction here. That's a loss because you have objections that I can't answer in real time. So it's going to be a bit one-sided, sorry. How is knowledge possible? Someone usually suggests instincts. And by instincts, usually you mean intuition because you're not a psychology graduate yet. In psychology, though, instinct has a specific meaning. An instinct, hang on, wait, I'll get back to that in a second. Instincts, complex inborn behaviors. Okay, good. Intuition, stuff that you just know. It pops into your head, you get a strong feeling, you're at the casino and you remember Wesley Snipes going, always bet on black. You get a really strong feeling you should bet on black, right? You have an intuition something's going to happen in your scalp or something. by the ancients called gnosis, direct knowledge, beamed into your head by God, that kind of stuff. Popularity, a lot of people believe something is true, right? A lot of people are Christians, and so Christianity seems to make sense. A lot of people in Colorado are Broncos fans, and like that common sense, right? Well, everybody knows X thing, it's just not reasonable. Okay, good, fine. Observation, you go through life seeing things, and based on your observations, you know X thing is true. Experiences, things happen to you. Experience and observation are almost the same thing. In your experience, I-25 is faster than a cat. Great. Authority, that is somebody you trust tells you the thing is true. Teachers, professors, politicians, maybe. Or you read it in a book. And because the book says it's true, have a good basis for believing a thing is true. And faith is absolutely a way of knowing. As you're guessing, we're going to tear down all of these ways of knowing, not faith in particular, but faith, absolutely. But faith outside of science absolutely is a way of knowing. And we'll talk about a couple of ways, not all the ways, it's not a theology class. Talk about a couple of ways of doing faith. And then data, research, scientific experiments, good faith reviews of the literature. Okay, so these are the basic ways. Maybe you could come up with something else. From here, these are the categories, and like finding something that doesn't fit in a category might not be impossible, but we haven't done it in 5 or 6 years. Fairly confident. Right, these are the categories. Okay, this is how knowledge is possible. So we need to bring all this stuff down, right? We need to tear it apart. So let's get into the flaws. What we're after here is certainty, okay? We want scientific certainty. We want to know a thing is true. Absolutely, 100% of the time, like a logical positivist, in all times, in all places, under all conditions, this is true. So for each of these ways of knowing, what we want to know is, does that give us certainty? So let's be clear here. We don't mean the feeling of certainty. Ultimately, from this point of view, certainty is only a feeling. Have you ever felt completely certain about a thing and then been totally wrong? Totally wrong about the thing. I mean the epistemological state of affairs where you feel right and it's a guarantee that you are right. Does any of this stuff get you to that metaphysical truth of the matter? And I think you'll find that defining the parameters like that, you just can't get there. So let's talk about instincts. In psychology, those are complex inborn behaviors. We'll deal with intuition separately. Complex inborn behaviors, the weaver bird knows how to weave a weaver bird nest. People just aren't born with any instincts. We're born with a few reflexes, Moro reflex, and you put something in a baby's mouth and it'll suck on it. Try and touch a baby's hand, it grasps. Reflexes don't have any instincts. What we get instead is adaptability. We get a ton of extra neural material so we can adapt to wherever we find ourselves. We do have some central tendencies. It's a central tendency for humans to be xenophobic, afraid of people who aren't like them, right? To be insular and clannish and stuff like that. It's a central tendency. To be more scared and angry than happy. That's a central tendency for humans. Those still aren't instincts. They're not complex inborn behaviors. And they're not immutable. They don't tell you what's true, right? Just because you're afraid of strangers, does that mean that strangers are bad? Because you're afraid of this particular stranger, does it mean that they're bad and intend you harm? Absolutely. You cannot trust those central tendencies. I'll make a stronger case later that in fact those are leading us down the wrong path. Okay, just because you're born to believe some kinds of things are true, it means that they probably had adaptive value in the past. Does it mean they have adaptive value now? I don't think you can say that's true. So let's move to intuitions or gnoses. So you get a strong feeling something is true. You don't have a good reason. You don't have evidence. You just get from inside, you go, I think the answer to that is, and you write down that answer, whatever. Sometimes you might be right? Is it reliable? That is 100% of the time you have a strong feeling about something. Is it true? Okay, then that's not certainty, is it? Right? We test people who claim to have intuitive powers, clairvoyance. Every year, the London Times or whatever it is interviews a whole bunch of psychics, and they get their predictions for the following year. And if the clairvoyants had strong intuitions that were reliable, then most or all of the stuff that they said would be what happened in the following years. And it never is. They never beat chance. No kind of psychic or clairvoyant or palm reader or astrologer or anybody or a reader, nobody beats chance. Okay? And if it's not reliable, it's not certainty, is it? It makes you feel good about yourself, but that's it. Not reliable. Let's say you had a psychic who was right half the time. Could you trust them for decisions? Because maybe they're beating chance, but which half of their answers are the correct answers? You don't know. So intuition is not a means of certainty, is it? Popularity. A lot of people believe a thing is true. Is it true? My political science professor back in 1900 used to say, are two heads better than one? What if the two heads are Beavis and Butthead? Okay? Just because a lot of people believe something's true, is that a good reason to believe that it's true? It is a way that we get our information, absolutely. You go to Chuck E. Cheese or whatever, and you're not sure of the ordering procedure and whether you're allowed to touch the mice. I mean, the animatronic mice. Don't touch the real mice. You look around, right? You get that information from other people. What's socially appropriate, but can you get certainty that way? In 1840, almost every free American believed slavery was a great idea. Was it true? Are two heads better than one? Just because a lot of people believe a thing is true, obviously we're not getting at certainty here, are we? Just go around and ask people about the branches of government. A third of Americans can't identify the executive and the judicial and the legislative branch. People don't know anything, and not knowing anything, they believe they know a lot of stuff, but their judgments are deeply faulty. If you want certainty, you're better off relying on an expert in a field, but even an expert can't provide you absolute certainty, particularly on complex topics like the climate or the economy. Okay. But what about common sense? It's just common sense. Why did you do that just then? It's just common sense. That's what you would do. Yeah. One wit, maybe it was Samuel Clemens, quipped that common sense is so called because it's not common, in other words. There's really no such thing as common sense. You're back into instincts and intuitions and stuff, and popularity and some combination of this stuff where you get the gut feeling, yada, yada, yada. Common sense isn't a real thing in the universe stuff. It's really just a bludgeon that we use to beat people for mistakes they made that seem obvious in retrospect. Okay? There's no such thing as common sense. There's no shared collective pool of knowledge or. So obviously you're not getting to certainty that way. Think of all the times in the past we've just thought, well, it's common sense that, and it turns out to be totally Totally faulty. It's common sense that whales are fish. Wait a second, though, because we study and we learn. And okay. Observations. You believe what you see, right? And yeah. So here's an exercise usually better done in a classroom. We're going to do it anyway. Roll the dice, take our chances. Who is taller? In the United States of America, who on average is taller? Black or African American men or white men, Caucasian men? Who in America on average is taller? Is it black men or is it white men? You have an answer in your head. And probably you are thinking that it's black men. A few people are thinking the opposite. A few people are disgusted by the question because I said black and white, it must be racist. No, we can measure people's skeletal stature. The truth can't be racist. Now, we're not saying who's good or bad or who deserves what. We're saying who's taller, black men or white men. And most Americans believe black men are taller. And obviously that's not true, right? You get the way this thing is working. It's not true. White men on average are an inch taller than black men because this is a racist country. Your skeletal stature in adulthood depends very much on your access to resources in childhood. And because this is a racist country where those resources accrue to whiteness of skin, if you're black, you're much more likely to have grown up poor than if you were white. In other words, to have been underfed and undernourished as a child, and therefore not as tall. Your observations here have led you astray, because particularly if you aren't black yourself, which black men in American society are you exposed to? There are 5 times as many white people as black people in this country. And white people are the dominant culture. So black people cannot avoid white people. Black people do not rely on stereotypes about white people because they have direct experience with white people. But white people can and do avoid black people. If you go to church and you're white, you probably go to a white church. And there might be 1 or 2 black people in the congregation out of 10,000 people. You can tell yourself it's a diverse gathering, but it's not. You live in white neighborhoods and do white jobs with white people. And so, I know, not you, Derek, you're special. On average. What does that mean? That means that the black people, white people are exposed to tend to be athletes who are selected for their size, right? NBA All-Stars and football players. Or sports commentators who are themselves former athletes, or actors in movies where height is equalized unless it's necessary to the telling of the story. You know, Tom Cruise is like 5'7" or something. And you wouldn't know that. There's nothing wrong with being 5'7". Nobody cares. But if you're watching the movies, you wouldn't notice that Tom is much shorter than most of the other male cast members. And they like have him stand on a box or have the women in flats and whatever. So he always seems taller than the characters. Well, the same with black people, because there are people on the sets. Unless height is an important part of the story, it tends to just get equalized, and so you wouldn't see. Right? So here your observations have led you astray. You're just 1 out of 7.8 billion people, give or take, on the planet, having one of those 7.8 billion experiences. You got a particularly narrow, specific path through the universe, and you only see what you see. It's just not trustworthy. You don't have all the data, right? And that's making observations in good faith. Are you unbiased? White people tend to see black people in America as larger than they are. Tamir Rice, 13 or something, laying in the grass with a toy rifle. Some of this is on him. He painted out the orange tab at the end that marks it out as a toy so it's easily identified. Most of it's on the cops. They get a complaint of a man, not a boy, a man laying in the grass. They show up and they see Tamir, and to them he looks like he's 13 or whatever, and he looks like an adult human being. Darren Wilson, the police officer who shot Michael Brown, you can hear him on the radio. We have the recordings, and he's saying, this guy is huge. They're the same size. Like, if he's huge, you're huge, right? White people tend to see black people as older and more mature and larger than they are, and therefore to feel threatened by this. Or perhaps the reverse. I'm not really sure. But you're not an unbiased observer of the universe. And that goes through race and sex and everything, really. How about lions? Who's in charge of a pride of lions? Go out on the savannah. There's like 50 some countries in Africa. I don't even know which one would have lions. Well, find some Sveld or whatever. Go and look for the lions. See pride of them hanging out, doing their thing. Who's in charge? Well, the first Euro observers assumed it was the male lion, right? The king of the beasts. Because he has this huge, like, mane, this crown of hair, and giant testicles, and he's bigger than all the other, the female lions and stuff. They just assume he's in charge. But it's the 18th century, and they come from monarchical, patriarchal societies where might makes right. Right? The one with the guns has the gold, and the golden rule is if you have the gold, you make the rules. King Leopold of Belgium and whatever. So they look at this big lion capable of murdering all the other lions, sometimes does murder other lions. That's the guy in charge. Is the lion in charge of the pride of lions? Like, is he the king of the beasts? It's really weird to apply human political systems to animals, actually. They don't do politics the way humans do politics. So they're absolutely not a monarchy. If they were anything, they'd be like an anarcho-syndicalist commune or something, you know. They're commies. They're feminist commies. And the females make the decisions because the females do all the work, right? They are the hunters, and so the lion doesn't hunt. He's like a sperm donor and a rent-a-call. He keeps the pride safe from hyenas and other lions and stuff like that. Doesn't hunt. Females hunt, so they have to decide whether to follow the herds or wait by the waterhole or, you know, what. A lion can't take down an elephant. 11 lions in the dark can. So sometimes the pride is really, really hungry, and the only prey animal left in the region is an elephant, and they have to make this decision. Are we going to go for this? Because one of us is going to get stomped. You know, 11 lions can take down an elephant in the dark, but one of them's getting hurt badly enough that she's going to die. And you can hear them. Now, we've made these observations with FLIR cameras, infrared cameras, sector recorders and stuff. You hear them in the dark, surrounding the elephant, like rumbling to each other, and it's hard to imagine they're doing anything but making a decision. Are we really going to do this? And then coming up with the tactics of, you know, lions aren't in charge. But we didn't make an unbiased observation, right? The first white people to observe this came in with their monarchies and their patriarchies and stuff, and they weren't capable of imagining anything except the biggest guy would be. So much of our observation comes in. We're never an unbiased observer. We always bring foreknowledge to everything that we see. And so do you see how we have to rule out mere observations as a means of certainty just because you saw it isn't true? No. experience. Experience is virtually the same thing as observation. Maybe you drive I-25 because in your experience it's faster than Academy. But today it might not be, right? Is it always faster? Can you be certain that's the fastest way to go? I probably shouldn't, because big data is a problem now, but I often drive with Google Maps running, even when I know where I'm going, because Google is getting a picture of where all the traffic is and how fast it's moving. Google knows ways I don't know. And if I just do what Google says, I get there in the fastest time, which is often faster than if I just gone the way that I always know. Right? I guess what I want you to know here is that anecdotal evidence isn't evidence. Okay? This is the my Aunt Martha problem. Martha. I'm going to say Mabel because I always say Mabel. There we go. My aunt Mabel. There we go. That's better. So what happens is maybe I show up in a classroom ready to talk about smoking. I say smoking causes cancer. And then I operationalize my terms, and then I have mounds and mounds and mounds of data, millions of documents, hundreds of studies that all really confirm the same thing: smoking causes cancer. And then one person in the room, has a story. Wait a second, though, but my Aunt Mabel started smoking 4 packs of cigarettes a day when she was 12 years old. Now she's 104. She doesn't have cancer. Wait a second, though. Does your individual story outweigh the mounds of empirical data that say that smoking does cause cancer? Because I didn't say everyone who smokes a single cigarette will immediately die of cancer. Smoking causes cancer, and if nothing else kills your Aunt Mabel first, she's been lucky so far. If nothing else gets her first, cancer will. It's just there's a genetic predisposition, almost certainly, that is protecting her from cancer. She's been very fortunate. Because most people who smoke as much as your Aunt Mabel will die of cancer or heart disease if nothing else gets them first. Smoking causes cancer. It's a straight line relationship. The more you smoke, the more cancer you get. Your Aunt Mabel, your one individual experience does not outweigh all of the evidence, right? And just because you see one case of a thing, do you know that that thing is always true? Just because you've had an experience, can you be certain that is truth? I think you can see now that you cannot, right? Because of that one narrow path you're cutting through the universe. You're not looking at all of the data. You're just looking at the data you trip across, right? Data points you trip across. So what about authority? This means that someone you trust tells you a thing, and then you believe the thing is true. Because the president says it, is it true? Yeah. The current president has lied 16,000 times since taking office, as of the date of this recording. Yeah, we're keeping track for some reason. 16,000 objectively verifiable, at least shadings of truth, if not outright lies. It's because he says it, is it true? Just because Barack Obama said it, was it true? You can definitely make a case that the previous president made statements in good faith far more frequently than the current president. He still wasn't always right. If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. That turned out not to be true. Okay? There's a reason it wasn't true, primarily that red states who had just decided not to do anything for the 4 years that Obama was president didn't implement any of the Affordable Care Act policies. They sabotaged it so they could point at it and call it a failure. But it wasn't true. Just because someone you trust or like or whatever says a thing Should you trust everything I tell you? No, you shouldn't believe what I'm telling you because I'm saying it, right? I have a doctorate. I am definitively an authority in the field of psychology. And my data is old. I'm not perfect. I'll make mistakes. So think back to your teachers in elementary school. Did they ever tell you any lies? Like Columbus was a great dude? They're drawing their history of Columbus from a story written in the 1800s, or is it early 19, whatever. And it really shaded Columbus in a positive light at a time when Italians were the last group into America and therefore subject to all the discrimination, the xenophobia. America hates immigrants, and they were the last immigrant group taking our jobs and stuff. And so Italians were able to identify with Columbus and feel good about being Americans and get that inclusion they were looking for from other Americans. But the story's just complete crap. Columbus was a genocidal maniac, only interested in gold. The Lakota and Lucaya people, ever hear of them? No, you haven't, because Columbus wiped them out. The first Thanksgiving and Squanto and all that stuff. You know why the Pilgrims showed up and found vast tracts of arable land free of trees and rocks? Because previously there had been Native Americans there farming that land and burning back the trees. And previous explorers had given them various diseases, including smallpox. 90% of them died. Squanto showed up to help so he wouldn't starve to death because everyone else was dead. Your teacher's never wrong. Grab this book if you're so inclined. It's James Loewen, and the book is Lies My Teacher Told Me. Sort of a truthful history, you know, inclusive, people of color, Native Americans, and so on. Here's his website. Shocking, just shocking. So go around and ask your professors and your teachers and stuff. We'll usually be pretty honest about this. Right? Your high school teacher will tell you their job is largely to correct the lies you learned in elementary school. And your college professors will say, well, my job's mostly to correct the lies you learned in high school. When I have the misfortune to be teaching graduate classes, people who are about to be doctors, I'll tell them my job is largely to correct the lies you learned in undergrad. Hence Agreement 1, it's why we're doing this now, right? Because I don't want to be passing on people whose heads are just full of bacon and stuff, lies, whatever. So that's one form of authority. People say a thing. Just because someone says it, is it factual? No, not necessarily. But what if it's written down? It's in a book. Books are sacred. Just because it's written down in a book, is it true? Come on now. I write books. Anyone can write a book. Just because you write it down, you're still a person writing that thing. And some classes of book are more reliable than others. Is it peer reviewed? Is it refereed? Is it part of a curated collection? And even so, there are going to be limitations. Knowledge in books gets old, right? The second it leaves the press, new knowledge is being found. And people often aren't writing those books in good faith. So I have a friend from the right side of the political spectrum, really the very far right side, who likes to argue with me about stuff, almost anything. And I'll say, but you don't know anything about this topic. You're not qualified. And she goes, but I read books. I go to the library and I read 1,000 books a year. Great, you should do that. That's fantastic. Are they curated? Are you reading every book on a topic? Or are you reading the first 5 pages of a book, and if you like it, you finish reading it, and if you don't, it disagrees with you on stuff, are you putting it aside? Because it's easy to read 1,000 books a year, and all of them come from one particular political ideology, isn't it? Just because it's written down, is it true? I think you have to say, obviously not. You shouldn't believe people because they have authority. You shouldn't believe people simply because they are authorities. To the extent you believe what I say, it should be because I've conducted a good faith review of the best available literature on a topic. And when you feel funny about a fact, you've gone and looked for that fact in the peer-reviewed, refereed literature, not on your ultra right-wing racist websites or whatever, your pro-communist, pro-Putin stuff, and the internet. Stop it. Okay. What about faith? This is where people get really angry. Sorry. We have to talk about it. Mere belief. Does mere belief prove things true? So there's a couple ways to do faith that we're going to talk about. I mean, there's a whole mess of ways to do faith. I'm going to leave a lot of it out because it's not a theology class. Ultimately, what I'm saying is unfair, but you can't do any better than this. All right. Faith, religious faith, 2 ways to go. One is fundamentalism. And fundamentalism, we believe it's true because that's what we believe, right? So a person will show up in the class and they'll say, I'm a Christian, therefore I believe X thing. For a scientist, that's backward. If you believe a thing and that's included in a faith, then you could consider joining that faith. We have beliefs in common and we're doing good works. But because a faith believes it, that's not good evidence that a thing is true. And so, right, you have it backwards. I'm a Republican, and so I believe a libertarian, and therefore my beliefs are, wait, you're taking your marching orders from a group of people, and we've already shown popularity is not a great reason to believe stuff is true. But that's fundamentalism. That's where you start off with the thing that you believe, and then you go through the literature and only collect the facts that support that belief and let the rest go. It results in a lot of bad faith arguments because you're not interested in finding out what's true. You're interested in proving that what you believe is true. Okay? What if we wanted to build high-speed rail between Denver and Colorado Springs, and we started doing our studies to prove it were a good idea rather than to find out whether it were a good idea? That would be deeply faulty, right? Because if it weren't a good idea, we'd never know. It could be dangerous. It could be unrealistic in terms of cost. It could be ecologically disastrous. It could be, but you're only accepting facts that support your initial starting position. Fundamentalism doesn't occur merely in religious faith traditions. It occurs in politics, right? It occurs in branches of science. You get caught up in trying to prove a thing true. Well, ultimately, what we're saying is it's true because I believe it strongly. I've skipped a whole, 4 whole centuries of debate on this and gotten to the bottom line. The bottom line is it's true because I believe it very strongly. I know it's unfair. There's other ways to look at it. It comes down to this. And that's a problem, though, isn't it? It's not a problem. What you're saying is the strength of belief, what I'm saying is, which I know isn't fair. The strength of belief is connected to the veracity or truthfulness of belief. But if that were true, wouldn't we have very serious problems? So part of my experience is I worked for decades with people experiencing psychosis, and their faith is stronger than your faith. One particular patient believed that Hitler didn't die in World War II. Kind of the basis of the History Channel, right? Nazis and stuff. Believed Hitler survived World War II. Or he died, it's a little unclear. For some reason, though, he's reincarnated in the sewers under Denver. And Hitler's he's the good guy. He's the good guy in this narrative. And Hitler is a scientist who collects aborted fetuses. In this patient's mind, when a fetus is aborted, it's flushed down a toilet, and Hitler collects all the aborted fetuses, breathes life into them. And so he's there in the sewers under Denver, raising this army of angelic Nazi soldiers, the Fifth Reich, generated from fetuses. And any day now, any minute, any second, the sewers of Denver are just going to erupt with this Fifth Reich of angelic Nazis who are going to murder all of our unrighteous asses. Yeah. Now, the thing about this is no student has ever attempted to stab me. And if you contradict this guy in the smallest thing, he will try to stab you. So his faith is objectively stronger than your faith. Therefore, what he believes is true and what you believe is false. Do you see how that's a problem? Just because you believe a thing is true. Just because someone wrote it down 4,000 years ago and a pastor told you how to interpret those writings, is it true? I'm sorry, no. It's not. How many Christians are in the world? About 1.2 billion, give or take. And they don't agree on stuff. You know, there's basically two camps of Christians. There's the Old Testament camp. You know, they believe in Jesus, but they don't read much about him. They're Ten Commandments people. And then there's the sort of forgiving, socially liberal camp, right? Faith and works. They don't agree. They don't agree what's true. They're equally faithful. So how am I to choose who's right? How many Muslims are in the world? More like 2 billion. And Islam is fundamentally incompatible with Christianity. The facts asserted in the religious texts are at odds. Judaism is at odds factually with other faiths. Everyone believes, never mind the Sikhs and the Hindus and the Zoroastrians and the atheists, the militant atheists, right? We're just out there at their table. God is dead, prove me wrong. And they, you know, argue with me on their t-shirt. Hey, back off, Jack. Leave people alone, man. Everyone can't be right, right? A couple people right now are equivocating, like, well, if it's symbolic, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the facts written in the books can't all be true simultaneously, literally, which is what the fundamentalist believes. So is that a means of certainty? How do I choose? You know, I'm in public policy or treatment or something, and I have a scientific rationale for a thing, and then a Muslim and a Hindu and a Jew and a Christian are all sitting there giving their different interpretations of what I should do. They all believe their thing equally strongly and they have their books. How am I to make a decision? That stuff might be great for life. I don't know. It's not good for science. It doesn't lead to the epistemological fact of certainty, even if it leads you to the feeling of certainty, which I see how you would need that in an ambiguous universe where we're all going to die. So another way, almost an opposite way to do faith. This is Paul Tillich, the existential theologian. Paul Tillich says, faith is belief in the presence of doubt. So you believe a thing is true. You believe God created the universe in 6 days on the back of a whatever thing. Adam and Eve and stuff. And you know it's not true. You have direct evidence that contradicts those beliefs, deep time and fossils and whatever. You know it's not true, but you choose to believe it anyway because it's meaningful. And now you're balancing paradoxes in your head that both things are simultaneously true. That can be really good for us, actually, balancing paradoxes, getting used to ambiguity, to the fact that we don't know everything, that two things can be true at once. It can be really good for us. It can open us up in important ways. Okay, so that's Paul Tillich, belief in the presence of doubt. Just what I'd like to suggest is that science is doubt in the presence of doubt. That is, when we're given good reasons not to believe a thing, we stop believing it. Outside of psychology, outside of science, do whatever you want. I don't care. It's not a theology class. I'm not rating you on your religious beliefs. But in science, when we have a good reason to believe a thing is false, we stop believing it. Let's say you're designing a bridge. You're an engineer, you're an architectural engineer, civil engineer, I suppose, designing a bridge. And you need an I-beam, and you know its specifications and the material it should be made of. You design it, you draw up a prototype, you order it, comes in from the factory 6 to 8 weeks later, and you have faith. Right? You did all the math, you have faith in the steel and the load-bearing capacity and stuff, but you don't just slot it into the bridge, you test it. It's only a prototype, we're going to test it. And we're going to subject it to the forces the math say it has to withstand, plus 15%. And you subject it to those forces, you test its tensile strength and its compression strength and all that stuff. It buckles. Now you have evidence to contradict your initial belief, you stop believing it. Because if you have evidence that the I-beam cannot support the load it's intended to support, and you build the bridge with it anyway, people die. And I don't want to die driving across people's bridges. So that's faith. It's a nutshell faith. It's a nutshell faith. But if you spend years in theology, you eventually come back around to those two basic ways. Logic. You're probably taking me for a logic kind of guy. I just want to tell you that logic doesn't lead to certainty. It only leads to certainty in the realm of abstraction. Logic is an internally consistent system, but it doesn't really apply to things in the grander universe. You have a logical explanation, but that doesn't mean it says anything about the real universe. Okay, so the first problem, God, I can't remember the name of the guys right now. I'll revise this later on. But basically, you're not that good at it. Okay, problem one with logic is reification. Reification, you should learn this word because I'm going to say it almost every lecture. Reification is when you treat abstractions, constructs, ideas, as though there are real things in the universe with definite properties. Logic works well on abstractions, but in the real universe it tends to break down. Couple of illustrations. There are no triangles. Remember, a little earlier we defined a triangle. A triangle has 3 straight sides that each intersect 2 other sides and therefore create 3 angles that therefore add up to 180 degrees. And it's true in all times and places and circumstances mathematically. Cool. Go ahead and define a triangle right now. I'll wait. All that stuff I just said, right? Plus, what kind of thing is it? It's a geometric figure. In other words, it's two-dimensional. Please show me a two-dimensional thing. You cannot. Because if it's two-dimensional, it's not a thing. It's merely an idea. There's no such thing as a two-dimensional object. It's a two-dimensional figure. It doesn't exist in reality, right? So when I go, show me a triangle, people's first offering is usually that. Come on, bullcrap, that's a triangle. Honestly, you're not even trying. Is this a side? Dude, stop it. Is this straight? Is this one line even? Is this an angle? Obviously not a triangle, right? The formal definition of a triangle is impossible to meet in the real world. You're always going to stumble over that first block that it's not two-dimensional. Best case scenario, you lay ink on a whiteboard in a class, but you're putting a layer of ink onto that surface. It has dimensionality. Are those sides straight though? Even if we can overlook the two-dimensional thing, are those sides straight? The straightest straight edge in the universe, the straightest ruler you can find. Go down to the micron level, it's all jagged and stuff, right? It's made of atoms, and atoms are always bouncing around anyway. Nothing's perfectly straight, and if the sides aren't perfectly straight, can the angles add up to 180? No. Good enough for 6th grade with like your ruler and your protractor and stuff. In the real world, though, you cannot draw a triangle. It's impossible. So you might have logicked the thing out, but then you actually have to go and make observations to find out if it's true. You have to do empiricism. The best logic in the universe applies to abstractions, and we're not dealing with abstractions. We're dealing with real things. How long is the coastline of Britain? Not Ireland and Northern Ireland. I mean Scotland and Wales and England. How long is that coastline? Well, how could you find that out? Let's say we go on Google Maps, right? And we make ourselves a 1 kilometer line. We're willing to spend a day doing this. We walk that 1 kilometer line around the outside of the map of England. We blow it up kind of big and we do that. Is that how long the coastline is? That's really about the length of the coastline that you're going to find on the maps. Is that how long the coastline actually is? Wait a second, is there a static definitive coastline? Because isn't the tide always coming in and out? On any given day, might it be different at any given time of day? Isn't the coastline coming more in than out lately because of global warming, climate change, sea level rise? Isn't the coastline of Britain shrinking? Let's say we can freeze the tide in place or take an average or something like that. I'm letting you off of a thing I shouldn't let you off of. There is no definitive coastline. But for the sake of argument, let's say instead of taking a 1 kilometer line, you get a 1 meter wheel, right? You've seen the thing and you roll it along. And every time it goes around, it clicks once, and it counts once. And you get 400 people with 1 meter wheels, so we can do this in less than a lifetime, right? We're all going to go from our starting point to our end point. We'll have a section, we get in all the nooks and crannies with our 1 meter wheel. We add up all the results, we get a number. Is that number going to be 1,000 times longer than the 1 kilometer line? Because we're in all the nooks and crannies that the 1 meter wheel generalizes, that the 1 kilometer line generalizes. What if I did it with a 1 centimeter wheel? Aren't we now 100,000 times longer than the 1 kilometer? Doesn't the coastline of Britain depend what you're measuring with? And the finer your measurement, the longer the coastline. What if we got down to the electron level? If we got down to the quantum level where where stuff is just popping in and out of existence. There is no coastline of Britain to measure. It's a geopolitical construct, not a fact. That's the problem with logic. You have something in your head and you've worked it out step by step. If X is true and Y is true, then Z is true. The other trouble with logic is you're just, oh, I remembered it. I remembered it. The Dunning-Kruger effect. I should have led off with this, but here we are. The Dunning-Kruger effect is the tendency for people who don't know a lot to believe they know very much. The more you learn in a field, the more you're qualified to judge your performance and knowledge of a field, right? So at the beginning, you just don't know how much knowledge exists, and you feel like however much knowledge you have is close to the sum total of knowledge. You lack humility in a sense. But the more you learn about a thing, the more you're qualified to judge your knowledge and performance. So it's this U-shaped curve like this. Let's see if I can find you a picture of it real quick and hope that it shows up. Dunning-Kruger effect. Images, this one's good enough. Oh, can you see it? There. So the Dunning-Kruger effect, you start off with a lot of unearned confidence about a thing, and then as your competence increases, you're better able to judge, and so your confidence in your knowledge, skills, and abilities decreases. And then eventually, as you start to become an expert, you earn back some of your confidence, right? So I'm up in here, I have a doctorate in a field, and I am an expert in existential psychology. But I have the humility to know that I'm not an expert in cognitive behavioral approaches to psychology. I'm an expert in this, but not in that, right? When it comes to logic, you tend to, God, I hope everyone can see that. You tend to believe that you're really good at logic. You're just not that good at it. Have you taken some formal logic classes and some history and philosophy of science classes and gotten A's in those? And if not, sit down, Derek. You're not that great at logic, but you believe you are. There's a third problem here, which is motivated reasoning. Humans just aren't good at logic for the sake of logic. We're not good at trying to find out what's true. We're much better at trying to prove things are true, which isn't science. Motivated reasoning, we used to call it invincible ignorance. When someone has an idea and they're good at arguing and you can't ever talk them out of the idea. We used to believe that when you approach a person with weak arguments, you just strengthen their position. Now what we know is even if you approach a person with strong, irrefutable arguments, they find a way to refute them. And the harder they work to refute them, the more they just believe their initial position. So logic, even if you could do it and you're not good at it, what does it apply to? Abstractions, and we're not in the realm of abstractions. What does that leave? That leaves data. So we go out and we make a ton of observations and we compare all those observations, we lump them together, and I'm a scientist. What I'm going to tell you is data is not perfect. Another wit said, democracy is the worst way to run a country, except for all the other ways. Right? It's messy. Democracy is messy. Sometimes it makes dubious choices, but ultimately it tends to be self-correcting over time. And when you compare it to the other ways, we thrive much better as a democratic country than as any of the other kinds of doing a country over the long term. Same's true of data. Data is the worst way to know anything, except for all the other ways. Yeah. What are the problems here? Well, there's the single study problem. The single study problem is where you read one study and then you believe something's true, and then you just stop listening. You know, certainty is the decision to refuse any new information. So combine that with the Dunning-Kruger effect. One of the problems of data is you're not qualified to read it, right? So in your paper that you're going to write this term, maybe the first few things you find are in medical journals, and you're just not qualified to read medical journals. But it's possible to make mistakes. So the anti-vax people love Andrew Wakefield. Wakefield has been defrocked. That is, he's been stripped of his medical license. He's not allowed to practice anymore. And people still believe what he says. He still tours, and people give him money to appear at their things and stuff. Wakefield in, what year, 91 maybe, publishes this study showing a link between autism and vaccination. And it's a small effect, but it is an effect, and it shouldn't really have drawn any attention, but the way science has covered it did. It gets something like Good Morning Britain or something, and it scares parents. Parents stop taking their small numbers, but enough to be concerned, to be a concern, stop taking their kids in to get their vaccinations. It's a public health problem now. So we look at it a little closer, science looks at it a little closer. And they find that the numbers he publishes are not quite accurate. Like there's some problems in the math. But we publish that, people keep believing it though, and so we look a little deeper and we find that the numbers he published aren't true. That he left out some of the data, and we don't assert yet he did it on purpose, but he left out some data, and with those data points included, there is no effect. There is no correlation. As 107 or so other studies have shown, there's no correlation between vaccines and autism. Well, that's a problem, isn't it? And then we look a little deeper and find, because people keep believing it. People keep believing it. We look deeper and we find that Wakefield, in fact, had a significant investment in a vaccine company that was going to launch without the ingredients in the MMR vaccine he was studying initially, right? Thimerosal, the mercury derivative. And he's saying that thimerosal causes the autism, and so we should all be really scared. And maybe, you know, if you thought thimerosal was a problem and we're launching a vaccine that doesn't have that, that's a conflict of interest, isn't it? A financially significant conflict of interest. And so all this led to eventually Wakefield being defrauded. And people still believe vaccines cause autism. Stop it. They don't. You know, hundreds of studies by now have shown no effect and far more harm from not vaccinating. And people just won't change their mind on a thing, right? And honestly, like, why are you so scared about autism? I have autism. I'm an autistic guy. Are you saying I don't have a right to exist? Or what are you so afraid of? Because you know, sad autism mommies on the internet tell you how horrible their lives are and stuff. Come on, please. Yeah, that's all I want to say about that. But then sometimes it's in, Andy Wakefield was shown to be in bad faith. He didn't just make a mistake, he was shown to have committed fraud. That's why he's not a doctor. But sometimes the bad faith is plain for all to see. It's easy to take one or two lines out of one or two studies and show that climate change is a fraud. You misinterpret the data on purpose, right? The study shows climate change is true. You're using a couple lines taken out of context, combined with people's Dunning-Kruger effect and their motivated reasoning, their wish to already believe it's happening, right? And show that it's false. It's easy to take a couple things out of context and do that. But we've known about climate change for 30 years. You know, I wrote my first climate change novel in 1988. Okay, we knew it was true. We become less convinced of it as a public over time in exactly the proportion that science has become more convinced of it. Because of a massive public relations campaign on the part of big oil and coal and stuff. You have all the receipts on that. Don't even argue with me. You can't base your knowledge on single sources. You have to base your knowledge on a good faith review of all of the best available literature. You don't look at one or two points in one or two articles. You look at all 30,000 articles. You immerse in the science so you know what the data points mean, and when there seem to be little inconsistencies, you understand those in context. That is, data is not the best way to make a decision. Immersing in the data, becoming an expert in a field, earning back your unearned confidence is the best way. Conducting a good faith review of all of the best available data. Trying to find out what's true rather than prove a point of view is the best way to make a decision. A perfect one? No. But the best we have. Where does all this leave us? I don't even want to get into infiltration at this point. You know, the revolt from Harvard students a few years ago, scientists being paid to run studies at universities that prove that psychopharmacological agents are effective, so to find out. You just can't believe what you see in the medical literature when it comes to pharma at this point. I don't even want to get into that right now, but it's another problem that we've assumed people were making good faith arguments when they were not. Where does all that leave us? It leaves us here. What I'm selling is postmodern empiricism. I know you've heard a bunch about postmodernism, but honestly, people are out of their lane on this. Postmodernism is the acknowledgement that logical positivism is possible. Certainty isn't possible. Sorry. Be certain about stuff offline when you're not in class, whatever, I don't care. Right? For a scientist to make scientific decisions, particularly in a field that has a history of creating and maintaining systems of oppression, you have to be careful. Certainty is not possible. One of the lies that your teachers told you is that science proves things true. Science doesn't attempt to prove things true. Science attempts to prove things false and sometimes fails. When we've attempted numerous times to falsify an idea, then we provisionally accept that idea is true. For example, evolution. Evolution has withstood 10,000 attempts at falsification over the 160 years, give or take, that it's been around. It is in principle falsifiable. It makes claims that lead to hypotheses that can be tested. And when we test those hypotheses over and over again and fail to disprove them, we provisionally accept that evolution is true, provided that it's not falsified tomorrow, because it remains in principle falsifiable. Does that mean evolution is true? No, it means it's the best idea we have right now. Because we can never be 100% totally certain, we just have to be really careful what we say is true. Does not mean that all beliefs are equally valid, right? So some of your political operators out there right now, the people who lie in public, they'll tell you that because we can't prove anything is true, it doesn't matter what you believe, it only matters what's politically expedient. It still matters, it especially matters what we say is true. Science is doubt. Science is doubt in the presence of doubt. When you have a good reason to stop believing something, you stop believing. So that's lecture one. No test on this, no multiple choice. You don't have to agree with me. If we're doing science, you agree with me. The rest of life, you don't have to, man. Leave what you want, because you don't have to be as careful. You're not out there creating and maintaining systems of oppression. You know? But that is, this is how we know in psychology. It's how we do business in psychology. Yeah, so there's that. And next week, there will be lectures stemming from the material. Thanks for hanging out with me for this process. Catch you in the funnies.